And now let's try to get the menu working in VR. So we have a menu manager which listens to certain events and then it creates a advanced dynamic texture for full screen, and you can only have one full screen dynamic texture at a time. But for VR, I want to have two different textures, one that's mounted to the wrist and the other one, well, both of them are mounted to the wrist, I guess. I guess it can be one dynamic texture as well, but it's attached to a mesh. Yeah, so maybe it would look the same as what we have here. So this is the wrist part, and maybe this pops out of the wrist. But then maybe the orientation is different, so it can be in 3D. I think that makes it much more flexible. So this is on a flat thing, and we'll have two different textures. One that rotates with the wrist, and one that can be positioned at a slightly different angle. And in order to do that, they're not on the same mesh, they're on two different meshes. That's the most flexible thing. So we'll create two planes. So public, let's say wrist plane is a Babylon abstract mesh. And then we'll say that the browse plane is another abstract mesh. And we're going to listen to certain events to create the planes. So camera ready, we're not going to do anything. That's the regular camera ready. But when we are entering XR, we're going to want to create the meshes for this. So this wrist plane is going to be Babylon Mesh Builder, create plane. And what are the proportions for this? So let's look at some previous code here where we created this plane. It's probably this. So this wrist plane is, let's say, wrist plane as a small height and width, and we'll just, I don't think we need to modify this much. We can, yeah, show the bounding box for now. And then okay, so entering XR creates the plane. And so if we're exiting XR, I suppose we can remove the plane. And there's something about adding it to the grip here. So we did this thing, that when we're entering XR, we added this thing to parent the plane to the grip. So we're listening for controller ready. When the left controller is ready, then we would do all this kind of stuff. And I suppose we can still do it because this isn't ever going to happen unless you're in VR. So this is probably something better to listen to. We said create menu overlay. So let's retain this portion. Come back up here. So never mind about this. I think instead of entering the VR, we'll listen for that the controller's ready. So let's listen over here. When the controller is ready, we filter for the left controller, and then we create VR menu overlay. And what was this about? Create VR menu overlay is over here. So here we create this stuff. Grab it and take a look at it. Alright, so we create the VR menu overlay. So we're going to create the plane, and I think we've already established this here. So first two lines, we're going to create the wrist plane. And I think we don't need this part. Then we say that the parent, this wrist plane parent, is this scene manager, XR manager. So do we get a scene manager? What do we get in here? Yeah, we have a scene manager. Make it public. Weird, okay. And then we create a texture. Okay, so we need a texture for each. So let's call it wrist texture and browse texture. So a texture for each of these. So public wrist texture. Wrist GUI. One of these. Public browse GUI. There's also one of these. So over here, we'll say that this wrist texture create for this mesh. Wrist texture does not belong. Oh, wrist GUI. Wrist GUI. Okay. And then we already have so we already know how to render this, right? Not quite. So the way we've been rendering it is we call render this state to controls. So when we created full screen UI, at the end of it, we did call this render state to controls. So I suppose we can call the same thing in here. Just render state to controls. And what does this do? So state to controls gets back the controls. And it doesn't know how it's going to render them. It's just, here's your controls per your state. And so we'll look at render. And so this cleans up every single time. So we only want to do this if this is something. And we are in 2D mode, right? And this scene manager, XR manager, in XR. We're not in XR. Then we want to do this. Otherwise, let's say we're in XR. So we're in XR, and we want to see if there's this risk GUI. If there's a risk GUI, then this risk GUI root container dispose, and you just want to pop it in there. You don't have to create like an adaptation or anything. You just say this risk GUI add control, and it's going to be content menu control. So I haven't gotten to the expanded menu yet, but we should see something on that. So if we jump into XR, do see something on our plane. Let's rotate this a bit. We'll push forward with our camera. Oh yeah, we see a menu there. It's a really ugly menu, but it's a menu. Mute and unmute. Okay. So that's a huge, that is a huge thing right now. This is 20 centimeters. And my wrist probably is just 5 or just 10 centimeters across. Let's make this 10 centimeters across. Okay, I mean it's tiny. How does the height of those things work? Okay, we exited and I don't see any menu here. So menu height of these should be at what's a stack panel, so you need it the height in pixels. Uh, anyway, what happens next? We have to continue with the other control. So in the create, let's create the plane for the other thing. Do in a similar fashion. This browse plane is this, obviously much bigger. It could be like 1 meter by a meter. And show the bounding box. And then we can have this browse GUI is GUI advanced dynamic texture create for mesh. This browse plane, and then attach some kind of control. No. Then the render will attach the control. So we go to render. So if we're in XR, so depending on when this gets fired, that might be the reason why this didn't render anything. So when we want to render, yeah, I guess we can just check to see if these planes are there. If you have the GUI, go ahead and try to update it. So if this risk GUI, let me try to do that. And if this what GUI? Browse GUI. There's a browse GUI. This browse GUI, root container, dispose, and then this browse GUI dot add control content dot browse control. Of course, the positioning of this thing, we want to place a little bit maybe left of the thing, a little bit higher. Browse plane, yeah. So this browse plane position Z, let's see, X, Y, Z, give it 0.1, it's a little bit out there. And then this browse plane position Y, give it like a little bit of height here as well, just so it's not on top of each other. So I think that should do it. It's just very hard to test it with a browser here, because if as soon as I go in here, oh, it's not parented. Yes, I do need to parent it. Yes, this browse plane parent is equal to this scene manager, XR manager, left input source script. Okay. I have no idea how that's going to behave. Let's check it out.